you finished with an employee net promoter score of 55.9, which is basically beyond world class.
If you recognise people as being your greatest asset, well, guess what? You need to invest in that asset.
We like to think that our culture isn't one where people feel afraid to voice their opinion. We work really hard to create a safe space for people, and there's no fear of repercussion.
When you have a culture where people can be the best that they can be, that delivers business results that can be the best that they can be.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, or good night, depending where in the world you're joining us from for today's episode of the Vibrant Workplace podcast. I'm your host, Craig Thompson, and this is the show where we explore how to build a better working world for both employers and employees. It's supported by NI Job Finder, and that's the place where you can find vibrant workplaces offering quality careers. Today is a very special episode of the show because we are spotlighting one of our vibrant workplaces. That's an organisation that have successfully completed the Vibrant Workplace Accelerator and proven over a meaningful period of their time that their employees most often have a good or great day at work, are engaged with the work that they do, and think other job seekers should come and work in the company too. Today, I am thrilled to be with Olga Pollock, the HR Manager, and Niall Martindale, CEO of Kinecx Energy. Thank you for having me here. Thank you for coming on the show.
Thanks for the opportunity, Craig.
Absolutely. Thank you.
You done any podcasting before?
No, first time for everything.
Yes, me too.
Yeah, okay, neither of you. Right, very good. Well, look, this is just a casual conversation so that people can get a bit of an idea of what the culture is like in your organisation and what's happening under the bonnet. Okay, so just to begin with, Niall, do you want to tell us a little bit about Kinecx, a bit about the background of the organisation and what you do here?
Sure, so Kinecx, we're a gas distribution company. We're headquartered here in Antrim. We have 65 employees at the moment. And we've invested £250 million in the gas network that runs from Derry, Londonderry, right round to Newry in the southeast. So we're outside about 200,000 homes and businesses in the province, and we have 75,000 that are connected. So the mission is to connect the 125,000 that we still don't have connected to our network.
And they're all listening to this episode of the podcast, so this is your opportunity for the sales pitch.
There's a bit of that as well.
So, Olga, do you want to tell us a little bit about the background of the organisation in terms of culturally?
Sure, yeah. I guess maybe going back to when I started in 2019, I was taken over from the previous HR manager who had been here quite a long time. So she was well trusted and well respected, but it was an opportunity for me, I suppose, to get a feel of where the culture was at that time. And I used that as an opportunity to talk to staff, management, employees, SMT, to try and understand, I suppose, what was working well, what were the pain points, where were the challenges. And it was out of that then that we formed a number of pillars that we then focused on, because if those were the pain points, that's where we needed to spend our time trying to address. I mean, it's all very well me coming in as a new person and, you know, oh, I'll introduce all these new benefits, but that doesn't mean anything unless it specifically addresses what the issues were at the time. So that was the starting point. And then fast forward a 6 years, which has gone in a heartbeat. We've been through a lot of change as a business. So last year we sold the supply part of our business. And again, that was a difficult time in the sense that we were saying goodbye to friends and colleagues. But it was also an opportunity then for us to regroup and reconnect as a business going forward. So that's what led us then on to the Vibrant Accelerator and the journey then that came as part of that process to work together to collectively to try and make us, I suppose, we think we're great, but we never rest on our laurels either. We always want to try and improve.
I think that's something that I've noticed about the culture here. Authentically, right throughout every level of the business, you're not resting on your laurels. You're always thinking about, right, what's next? How can we improve further? So when we started working together, I always remember that the name that was given to the project was the Good to Great project. And the moment then that we saw the incredible results at the end of the accelerator, it was immediately okay. So now we're great. How are we getting to exceptional?
Yeah.
I think that is very different than the mindset in a lot of organizations. So where do you think that comes from?
From my point of view, I mentioned there the investment that we've made in infrastructure in Northern Ireland. And whilst it might be cliched to say people are your greatest asset, I don't think it should be cliched. I think absolutely people are your greatest asset.
Yeah.
And if you recognize people as being your greatest asset, well, guess what? You need to invest in that asset. You need to maintain that asset.
Yeah.
You need to nourish that asset, and call it what you might, but in doing all of that, you create a culture within which those people can be the best that they can be. And that's a key drive for me, because I think when you have a culture where people can be the best that they can be, that delivers business results that can be the best that they can be. So I think there's a direct correlation in that. So for me, it really starts from recognizing that, as cliched as perhaps it sounds, people being your greatest asset, they are, and as such, you need to invest in that asset.
Yeah. So here's what I'm always really curious to unpick and try and understand. That makes so much sense to me, and it makes so much sense to you, and I know it makes so much sense to Olga, but so many organizations don't operate in that way. And I think that each of us individually, we have our own experiences, we come up through our careers in a certain way, and the experiences that we have imprint on us and then make us feel that way about things like this, or not. What is it, when you think about your career, I know, Olga, you mentioned that you've been here about 6 years. Niall, you've been here
10.
10 years.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's your anniversary.
It's my anniversary week, actually.
Yeah.
10 years.
Is it really?
In the business, yeah.
What a time to be on the podcast.
Absolutely. Yeah.
We should have had a
Perfect
cake.
timing.
Absolutely.
So, thinking about your career, and I'm not going to ask you to name names, name companies or anything like that, but what is it that imprinted on you throughout your career that made you decide people are such an important asset and really need to be at the heart of the way that we do business for the business to fulfill its potential? And that question goes to both of you.
Well, I've experience of seeing great culture and not so great culture. So
Yeah.
I know what it feels like when people aren't a priority.
Yeah.
And that, being in an HR capacity, it's really difficult because your role just becomes just transactional.
Yeah.
You're there as a personnel function.
Mm-hmm.
And that never sat with me, I suppose, from a moral perspective.
Yeah.
And the first time I came here, now bearing in mind, I was coming for interviews, so I was a bag of nerves. But as soon as I walked through the door, there was a sense that this felt like a good place to be.
Yeah.
It's whether it's a positive energy or what way you want to look at it. And whenever I saw then a great culture in action, and I can see that very clearly, that starts from the top.
Yeah.
And my experience has been that if it doesn't start from the top, you can have the most driven and ambitious and hungry HR catalysts and change agents in your organisation, but they're fighting an uphill struggle. They're never going to win.
Mm-hmm.
So that for me is the difference, that it comes from the top, and then that just easily sort of permeates down throughout the organisation.
Yeah. And that's always an interesting thing to unpick as well, and sort of challenges. Is it possible for an organisation to have a good culture if, you could have 90% of the business who want it to be a vibrant workplace, but if it's not committed to at the top, is it possible for everyone else to make this a good company to work?
Personally, I don't believe so.
No.
And for anybody in a leadership position who doesn't recognise the value of a strong culture, frankly, they're missing a trick.
Yeah.
And a very, because culture is quite often dressed up as the fluffy stuff that sits to the side of the business.
Yeah.
And the commercials, and don't get me wrong, there's a lot of pressure on all of us to deliver from a commercial point of view, from a business point of view. And, but I think perceptively in a lot of organizations, culture is fluffy. It sits to the side. It's your ball pits and slides type stuff.
Yeah.
That we'll worry about that when we've delivered on the business side of things. But to me, the two are absolutely integrated.
Yeah.
And I'm strongly of a view that you can't deliver one without without the other. So in the absence of that recognition from the leadership team within the organization, frankly, I think it's going to be an uphill struggle, and which will actually negate the benefit of even trying to achieve a good culture. I just can't see that works. So I do think you need buy-in. I'm convinced actually you need buy-in from the top and from the beginning.
Yeah. So now you're obviously the CEO. A lot of CEOs almost have this visceral response because of the exact reasons that you've mentioned. They see culture as soft and fluffy and nonsense, and something that maybe one day when the business is absolutely thriving, then we'll look at culture. And these kind of things are nice things to do, but they're not business critical. But you've talked about how there is an intrinsic connection between the commercial side of the business, the performance, and the culture. What is it from your career that made you think that way?
Experience, I suppose, number one, and you know, a little bit like Olga. I've experienced the good, the bad, and the ugly, to be honest, in terms of culture within places that I've worked. And without doubt, those with the most positive culture are the places that will deliver, and commercially are delivering as well.
Yeah.
And I think it's back to the old saying, I suppose, negativity breeds negativity, right? And positivity breeds positivity. And if you've got a culture where people are allowed to be themselves, respected, heard, valued, understood, and to the extent that that culture becomes authentic and positive, and people are thriving, people are there to be the best that they can be, not just for themselves, but when you've taken a little bit of time and aligned everyone's goals within the business to the vision of the business itself, well, when they thrive to be the best that they can be, they're equally thriving for that business to be the best that that business can be, and everyone's pointing in the right direction, and the same direction, more importantly.
Yeah.
So for me, it's that sort of blend of experience and the realization that ultimately it's as simple as positivity will breed positivity from within the person, and that will absolutely deliver for the business in the long run.
Yeah. So on that note of positivity breeds positivity, I want to share some of the statistics that we took from the accelerator, because I sort of backed myself into a corner a little bit. I made a commitment to my audience, both for the podcast, but also at the Vibrant Workplace Forum events, that I would not showcase any organization again that hasn't got the evidence, the statistics to prove that they're a good employer. And I think that's very important, because there's so many big events out there where the halo effect gets given to organizations because of their name, because they're big, because of who they are, not because of what they are. I went to an event just last week, and it was just quite ironic for me, because I know two people working in this organization. One of them has just been made redundant, and the way that it happened wasn't very nice. The other person, I had rang them out of the blue about 2 or 3 weeks ago there. This person never complains, and I rang them up, and I didn't get a word in. They spent 45 minutes just ranting about the company. And then I go to this event about employee well-being, and who's on stage? It's the HR department from that company, and I'm thinking, come on. When we go to these events, when we listen to these podcasts, how do we actually know that it's not just PR? I want people to have the evidence to know these are companies where people are looked after. And what we found through the accelerator with yourselves, and this is absolutely mind-blowing. You obviously know these stats already, but your employees had 18.2 times more positive than negative days at work. Now, just to go a little further into the detail of that, there were 3.7% of the days in this company that were negative. 3.7% of the days were bad or terrible. I mean, I looked at that and I think, why did I not know about this company whenever I was coming up through my career? Because I wouldn't be self-employed. That's the truth, if I had worked in a company that cared about people. So that's incredible. Your employee engagement score was 84%. Your employee net promoter score, and I always need to give a bit of context behind this, because a lot of people who are listening won't know what that is or how it's calculated. The employee net promoter score is one question, and it goes out to the workforce and it says, how likely would you be to recommend other people take a job in this company? They respond with a scale of 0 to 10. Now, this is an industry standard. I don't set the way that this happens, but I find it a little bit confusing because if you ask some people what's a good score out of 10, some people might say 7 is a good score out of 10. But to be regarded a promoter, those people have to be scoring you a 9 or a 10 out of 10. That's really hard to achieve.
Yeah.
9s and 10s. And that's showing that they're so compelled by their experience of working in the company that they want to proactively go out of their way to tell other people, come and work here. So 9s and 10s out of 10 are promoters. 0 to 6s are detractors, which means the lower the score, the more likely they would be to say, avoid this place like the plague. You take the percentage of promoters, subtract the percentage of detractors, you get a score between -100 and +100. A negative number shows you've got more detractors than promoters. That's a bit of a problem. 0 to 10 is said to be okay. 10 to 30 is good. 30 to 50 is very good. You finished with an employee net promoter score of 55.9, which is basically beyond world class. Most organizations on the planet would bite your hand off to get that score. And you started good as well. You started very good. You started at 43.6. You finished at 55.9. And then a good acid test as well is whether employees actually want to stay in the business. And what we found was that your retention outlook started at 87.3% of the workforce wanted to stay here. And at the end, it was 93.2. Now, if you're starting at 87.3, you can't get that much higher. You still managed to push it even higher, 93.2. I don't know what you're going to do next because I know you're always pushing for...
Always pushing for better. but therein lies, I suppose, one of the ingredients for success is that collective desire to do better and push on. And it's interesting when you talk about the 3.7% sort of bad days, and there is a reason for that, and I think we need to distinguish between what is a bad day and what is a challenging day. If you come into the workplace and you have a challenging day, and you don't have any idea what your objectives are for that day, or indeed that week, or that year, or the objectives of your colleagues for that week, the day, the year, very, very quickly your challenging day becomes lost in ether, and it becomes a very bad day. Now, I wouldn't suggest for a moment that we only have 3.7% challenging days. We have many, many, many challenging days. But the big difference, I believe, for us is that we understand what that challenge is in the first instance and what it is for. What are we collectively trying to achieve, both personally and as a business? And that goes back to having all our oars pointing in the right direction to push the Kinecx Energy boat the way we want to be pushing it. So when people come in and they do have challenging days, we all have challenging days, but they understand why it's challenging. And equally, they understand the mechanisms to go and deal with anything that might be perceived as bad before it becomes bad. They have the communications channels, they have discussions, open discussions with managers, open discussions with myself. It doesn't matter because we have the mechanisms to manage what might otherwise be bad days. So it does take a lot of work, but there are other aspects. It's not just the sort of happy-go-lucky culture piece of it. It's getting your organizational ducks in order as well.
I think you've touched on a really important point, challenge versus bad, because I think a lot of people still think of, when they hear the term culture, what you mentioned, the slides and the ball pits, and I'll never forget walking into a company a couple of months ago, and first steps into the MD's office, and he said to me, I am about to start a culture war in here. And I said, what's going on? And he said, I've walked in here today and they're all in a boardroom there making pottery under the guise of employee well-being, right? I think that people think culture is, the well-being days and the guest speakers and the days off-sites and, the gimmicks and the gadgets and, bring your pet to work day and office yoga. That's all disconnected from what culture really is for me. Those are all nice things to do. And I always say to people, do nice things because they're nice things to do. Don't think that that is your engagement strategy that's going to get your people coming to work and giving their best. Because actually, what I find is that most people, the people that you want to employ anyway, they actually want to do a good day's work. So they don't see challenge as a bad day, and maybe that's why it's not being reflected in bad and terrible days here, because what I find makes a huge difference, it usually comes up number one or number two in most organizations through the data that we get through mooqi, is that people come to work and they set out to achieve X, Y, and Z. If they get it done, they feel good about themselves because they put in a day's work and they can see the results, so they've had a good day. If they don't get it done, that might be when they start to feel like they had a bad day, okay? I think that people, we need to give them more credit than typically goes around about today's workforce. I think that people want to make an impact. They want to know if they're going to spend as much of their life working as they are, that they're making a difference somewhere. So
That's right, yeah.
I guess from that perspective, people can have those challenging days, but if they see the big picture, do you think people see the big picture and connect to the big picture in here, and that's why when they have a challenging day, they know it's in pursuit of something meaningful?
I do, yeah.
Yeah, no, I would agree. I mean, so back when I started, one of our pillars was around our organisational purpose, and we spent a lot of time actually with staff trying to look at our purpose and our mission and our vision, and we spent, I felt like months at the time, working with every single employee and getting their thoughts on what are we about, where are we going as an organisation, and what does our future hold. And what that did was it involved everybody in crafting those statements. Yeah. So it just meant by the end of it, it was probably a bit of a psychology exercise, but it meant that everybody felt that they had a role to play in the success of the organisation going forward. Yeah. And then every year, you know, there's probably the more sort of day-to-day operational side of things. When we set our annual objectives for the year, you know, everybody has a clear sight of, right, okay, this is what we need to do as a department, but here's how it actually fits with what the other departments are doing and with the success of the organisation going forward. So it's all sort of interconnected, and definitely I think people feel that yes, we come in and we do our day job, and we've called ourselves small but mighty, but we are really, really busy, you know, really busy, and sometimes it's hectic, and sometimes you get to the end of the day and you think, gosh, you know, but collectively then when you reflect back in the last month and even the last 6 months, you can think, look how far we've come. And I think we're quite good at that, as to just taking stock. One of the beauties of mooqi and of the whole accelerator process was actually celebrating our success, because we have dedicated time now in our mooqi meetings to say, look at all the comments, all the feedback that we've gathered through the mooqi app. Isn't this great? And probably we wouldn't have done that before.
And it is such an important part of the process, the work process, that often gets missed. There's a model it was created by a guy called Bruce Tuckman, forming, storming, norming, performing, that lots of people will have heard of. But afterwards, there was a fifth bolt on that was put on, which was adjourning, right? Which is, it's the celebrating success part. We get so busy, wrapped up in doing the work. We do a project, complete the project, move to the next project, complete the project, move to the next project. We never take the time to just stop and go, what's working, what's not working? Have we taken the time to recognize our employees? So your mooqi meetings are a place to do that then, to stop and go, right, what is life actually like in the company at the moment, and how are we experiencing working together?
Absolutely, yeah.
Do you find that people participate in those? Because some organisations, it's a bit of an adjustment. People aren't used to having a meeting about how are we?
Our people like to tell us what they think.
Is that right?
Yeah, I think
they're not shy.
that is the interesting thing about an authentic, open culture.
Yeah.
Be prepared to do a lot of listening, right? And that refines over time. I think when it's new and introduced to the business, people will have any number of things they'll bring to the party. You know, some which you'll take on board, and some, frankly, you know, are just not ready to be taken on board. But that refines over a period of time, and it refines to a place where, you know, people are prepared and ought to be, by the way, prepared to step up, you know, put their cards on the table, but in a way that they better understand perhaps how that's going to fit into the rest of the organisation, how it's going to impact your neighbour, your colleague, your manager, your customers, whoever it might be. So there is a bit of a learning process to it, and I think, you know, you talked about us going from good to great. I think we've been pretty good at making sure and trying to nourish that authentic culture that we have in Kinecx Energy. But what particularly we've been through over the last year or so in this transformation of recalibrating the business and focus of the business after the sale of our supply business last year has really given people the opportunity to do that, to bring good ideas, positive ideas forward as to how we might be able to improve and continue to improve in terms of some of the culture benefits moving forward.
I know that authentic, and that word authenticity, I know that that's been a very, very important word for you always, Niall. But how does an organization go from, maybe you've always had that authentic culture, but if someone's listening and they're thinking, we need more authenticity in this business, how do you build that?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. For me, it comes from the very beginning. The recruitment process is where it all starts. And I'm talking about the entire recruitment process, not just the interview process, but everything that sort of comes subsequent to that. The interview process is a kind of specialized spotlight process, and some people are good at it. Some people are not so good at it, to be frank. And it's difficult. You will test it in the interview process, but it's difficult to get under the bonnet of authenticity at that point in time. The key piece for me, as I said before, is probation periods, and that really is the jewel in the crown for I don't want to say testing authenticity, but recognizing or seeing authenticity in whomever is coming into the business, because during that period, if you've got a 3 or a 6 month probation, and you're not presenting yourself in terms of delivery or the authenticity that we would, I would say, not just expect, but demand, to be frank, from people, then guess what? This probably isn't the place for you. Or maybe you're not in the right place for you. And you need to be very, very disciplined through that process. And we are, to the extent we need to be, right? And of course, all about giving people the chance and all the rest. But if you're not prepared to shine and put your best foot forward in those 3 or 6 months, the chances are, to be blunt, you probably won't be inclined to do so after your probation period. So that is really the spotlight for me, is not necessarily just the interview process, it's the subsequent probationary period, and you do need to be disciplined. And I think, so that's where it all starts. And then it's to build that authenticity within the culture. Then it comes down to communication channels. And again, this is where it really needs to start at the top. You need to have defined, structured communication frameworks, one-to-ones, monthly meeting, quarterly meetings, maybe within directorates or business units, and maybe twice yearly town halls from likes of myself with the members of the leadership team, just to share with the business how the business is performing, and anything else within the business that needs to be shared or ought to be shared with employees at that point in time, and equally for them to be asking questions of you. So have defined communication structures. And the rest then is a little bit of a suck it and see as to communication is the, what would you say? It's an enigma of sorts, right? In terms of trying to nail 100% the right way to communicate with employees and vice versa. Get the structure in place. The rest, to some extent, might look after itself. Some people need 5 bullet points. Some people need 5 chapters to say the same thing. And that really is a little bit of a suck it and see between managers, employees, and directors. But start with the basics, get the structure in place, and that will start to engender at least an environment where authenticity can start to flourish.
I always remember when I first came in here, and we were doing this, cultural evaluation, and there was someone who made a beeline for me because they so badly wanted me to know that this was the best company that they'd ever worked in. And they said, the thing about this company is this company has had my back in times of need. And they said, if a competitor organization came along and offered me a significant pay increase, I wouldn't leave because this company's had my back when I needed it. So I want to have their back now. I think that's what you get when you get that authenticity, when you're part of something, where you feel good, where you feel like you're a human being, you're cared for, etc. you give so much more back in return.
Mm-hmm.
There is also a balance to be found though, because I think the organisational culture space has a lot to answer for in recent years, because there's so much that, all these gimmicky ideas that go around on social media, things go viral before we've seen the longer term impact and consequence of certain ideas. Like, this is not a popular thing to say, but everybody who says everybody should be able to work wherever they want, whenever they want, I think that kills culture. I've seen it kill culture so many times. So you see stuff that becomes popular on social media, everyone jumps on the bandwagon, but I see organisations that do that, their culture deteriorates, and what they end up with is they end up with a culture of entitlement. They end up with a culture whereby people take and take and take, but they don't give back. And I've always been very clear, we need to be looking for solutions that are good for the business as well as good for the workforce. We want people to have a positive experience at work. We want people to be happy, but they also need to be then, because of that, coming to work, contributing, giving everything that they can for the organisation. So how do you find that balance?
We have so many benefits, like for the size of the business that we are, any amount from annual performance awards to gym subsidies, hybrid working, health insurance, tons. But we're really, really careful, like you say, the latest fad, will that work for us? And you'll maybe find, staff saying, oh, we need to do this. But we're really, really careful about, we give it a lot of consideration, because for us, adding another element to our benefits package isn't necessarily going to mean that people become suddenly more motivated and engaged, because there's no direct alignment with them. So I think you get to a point, like you have said, where you become desensitized to this stuff, and it just becomes, an extra day's annual leave, really. That might be great for somebody, but for somebody else, they could take it or leave it. So I think for me, the culture is, benefits are nice to have, but they mean nothing if your culture is toxic.
Yeah.
And culture for me boils down to how we treat each other, how we respect each other, if we're kind to each other, when somebody's in need, when they have health issues or family problems, do we do right by these people? And that morally is the most important thing. And when you do that and you care for somebody when they really need it, you get it back in bucket loads. Yeah. It doesn't cost a penny.
I think that's an important point for me, is benefits do not equal culture. Culture does not equal benefits. Yeah. You've got to have the authenticity within the people within the organization, such that when you introduce benefits, it's that nourishing piece. You're nourishing a culture that already exists. You're not trying to create the culture in the first place. So the benefits that we have, and Olga's right, they're far and wide. And we don't just throw them out. I mean, we do take considered sort of business decisions in terms of, when they're rolled out, how they're rolled out, how we invest in, so on and so forth. There are business decisions, commercial decisions behind that. Yeah. But they are there to nourish the culture that exists already. They're not there to be the culture, if you like. Exactly.
There's a clear distinction to be made there, because there are organisations that have a policy, for example, of paying above their competitors and significantly above their competitors. What that gets you is, it makes it easier to fill vacancies, gets you people into the company, and maybe people stay. You've probably heard the term, the golden handcuffs. Yeah, so people will stay, but it's not just about being there, being present. It's about, are they contributing when they're there? And I think the difference that makes the difference there is the culture. Do people want to contribute? Do they want to engage? Do they want to make a difference with what they do? And that's not to say we don't need to get those things right as well, because I always refer to the taboo factors of employee engagement. I think that, you go on LinkedIn and you see these graphics that go around about how to engage a workforce and stuff. And it always talks about things like purpose and communication and meaningful work and these different things. These are all important things. I still think at the foundation, people need to feel like they're paid fairly. People will give up 100,000 hours of their life to employers throughout their career. I think in return, they should earn enough money to not be struggling. And sometimes people will say to me, if they're not happy with their salary, they should get a better job. And I think if they're given 100,000 hours of their life to do that job has to have value if it needs to be done. So they deserve to be paid enough to be able to do the job. But it's things like that. It's things like, the way that we resource teams. So many organizations will just operate on what I call a skeleton workforce. And what you get from a skeleton workforce is you get skeletons. You get people who come to work, they're burnt out, they can't perform, they disappoint your customers, they can't come to work as often because they go off sick, they leave the company, etc. So it's a false economy because we think have fewer people will save money. But actually, if we have the right number of people to do the work that needs to be done, they perform better, they stay, we're more profitable because of it. It's things like this. There's foundations that need to be in place to begin with. Culture then and all these other things are almost the multiplier. I know that that's a term that you've used now.
Yeah.
Culture is our multiplier. But I think you've got to have some of the fundamentals in place to begin with, and then this stuff can really flourish. When you used that term with me recently, culture is our multiplier.
Yeah,
What do you mean by that?
It's for me, it's the bit that sets us apart. And I said this term, I always say this term, right? But it's not just about what you do as a business, it's how you do it as a business, right? And the how is, to me, is just as important as the what in many ways. We run the business, we do important work, but to be frank, there are other companies that do similar work to what we do. But I believe what sets us apart from many of them is the how in it. And the how then comes about is the culture. We're greater than the sum of our parts individually.
Yeah.
And culture is the multiplier to that.
Yeah.
But that all goes back, some of the fundamentals there, to me, reside in everybody knowing what they're doing. So you're right, you need to set out as an organization, and you will need to understand as an organization, what's your vision, what's your goals, what's your strategy, how are you going to get there, how are you going to resource to get there, and when that cascades down, then when you resource, you pay fairly to make sure that everybody who's coming in knows exactly what their role is, what their challenge day to day, annually, whatever it might be, is, what are they trying to achieve, but equally, what their colleague and their colleague next to that are trying to achieve as well. So this is about a shared understanding of the goals at a fairly granular level within the business. So as you have an appreciation, a respect, if you like, for what everybody is trying to do to collectively get there. And that to me is it sounds very, very basic, right? It's sort of room 101 type stuff, but it's really, really basic. But the number of organizations where you'd walk in and maybe ask an employee, what's their goals for the year? And to be frank, maybe they don't know. What direction is the business? What do they serve? Even high level strategic goals of this business. What is this business trying to achieve? And perhaps they don't know. And the nugget in this for me is every individual in here, in Kinecx Energy, can reasonably draw a line between their objectives personally and the objectives of the business. And that gives them a reason, to be frank, to be here, and a thorough understanding as to why, frankly, everybody else is here.
Yeah.
So it's those basics that you need to get right.
Yeah.
And it's those basics upon which a good culture is built.
It's the story of the janitor from NASA.
Yeah.
That's right,
Isn't
yeah,
it?
absolutely.
And for those who are maybe watching or listening and don't know that one, but it's a story that says that there was a janitor working in the halls of NASA, and President JFK came along for a visit and bumped into this janitor, and he said to him, "What do you do here?" And he said, "I'm helping to put a man on the moon." Whether it's true or not, who knows? But I think it paints the picture, really clearly. Everybody needs to come to work and see how the dots connect between what their ask is, what they're being asked to do, and how it connects to something meaningful, the big picture. Because everything that we ask people to do, we're asking them to do it for a reason. If we don't paint that picture, then relationships can deteriorate, etc. Because we ask people to do difficult things or be under pressure, etc. And they think we're just mistreating them. And when they understand that we're asking them to do everything that we ask them to do because it serves the why, it serves the big picture, the purpose, then I think people get more on board with these things. And by the way, when it comes to resource as well, in terms of the number of people to meet the demands of the business, I do believe that you can have fewer people who are more engaged, perform better, and actually you can have a more lean head count, but of people who are hungry and who are all pointing in the same direction, fighting for the same thing?
But look, to me, it comes back to authenticity as well. And from a commercial point of view in this, a lack of authenticity in the business invariably means, to be frank, far too much BS within the business. And when you're operating a business where people are less inclined to be themselves, to be open, straight, they're more inclined to be maybe responding to people in a way that they expect those people want to hear, rather than what those people need to hear. And what you start to create very, very quickly in a culture that isn't authentic is a lot of noise, and a lot of noise equals a lot of inefficiency and a lot of time wasted. And it's back to that, in a culture that's less authentic, you will meet for the 10th time and guarantee that 10th meeting will reflect exactly what was spoken about in the first meeting, because nobody has had the trust or the gumption in many occasions to take the right decisions, because they're less inclined to be trusting of the reasons for taking those decisions, and the right decisions at that. So for me, the other sort of commercial side to this is cutting through the crap, to be honest. Mm-hmm. Be authentic, be open, be honest, be straight, be truthful, be respectful.
Yeah. And
you remove a significant amount, if not all, the inefficiency within that sort of one-to-one dealing with people. And that just takes you light years in terms of how you can operate within the business in a more efficient way.
So you mentioned before about how you need to be prepared to listen. And I think that, you must have had experiences of times when you brought people in here and you want that culture of authenticity, not just where people are prepared to listen, but where they're prepared to contribute and share ideas as well, and share feedback and challenge you. But maybe they've worked in organizations where there were consequences to doing that. So have you experienced that, where people have come in, they're not used to that, candid, authentic culture, and therefore you've almost got to work on them a little bit to get them to open up and to adapt to this?
I think that's human nature, to be honest. And human nature is to be default guarded, if you like, right? We're kind of protective of ourselves. We're guarded until we're comfortable with an environment that, to be frank, allows you to be less guarded and thereby a little more authentic. Yeah. So we're not naive to that at all. That's just human nature. But that kind of goes back to that recruitment process and the probation period. Give people the opportunity to come in, get used to our culture. Olga mentioned earlier, that you walk through the doors of here, and hopefully most people get a warm feeling. We're quite welcoming people. Hopefully get offered a cup of coffee and a biscuit maybe to boot. But people need to get used to working in that environment. Mm-hmm. So there is a learning curve to that. Yeah. But you need to equally embrace the fact that you're in a culture where people are authentic, straight. The communications are there to allow you to express what you need to express, again, respectfully and so on and so forth. Yeah. But to answer your question, it's not an immediate thing. And in fact, even coming from a fantastic culture, into Kinecx Energy, there would still be a notional guardedness until you get familiar with your colleagues and the ways of operation. So there absolutely is a sort of transitionary piece in that.
I think that almost the next level of that idea of people being open and transparent and expressing themselves, that on steroids is mooqi, okay? Because what you've done is you've given people the opportunity to say whatever they want to say every single day. Now, before you embraced that, before you signed up to the accelerator, before you brought mooqi in, and be honest, what were you thinking about that, about the idea? Or was that just so normal in terms of the way that you are here that you weren't worried about opening up a platform and letting people say whatever they want to say?
Probably not in terms, we'd never done anything on that scale in terms of the intensity. Mm-hmm. I think the first, for me, was the practical element of it. Are people actually going to log their mood every day? Yeah. And they did. not 100% of everybody every day, but we had a really high percentage of people that were using the app, and it almost sometimes became quite competitive in between departments and things like that, which was healthy. Were we scared? I think not scared, probably not the right word. We like to think that our culture isn't one where people feel afraid to voice their opinion. We work really hard to create a safe space for people, and there's no fear of repercussion. Niall works very hard at that. He's always very straight. If there's major business news, he's on the ball really early to tell people what is going on rather than hiding things, away. So there's always that openness, I think. There are comments on mooqi that have come through, and some of them sting. Our staff don't sugarcoat things. Yeah. But again, I think it's become reflective of who we are, because they feel that they can't and they will tell you.
Yeah, yeah.
But, the beauty of mooqi was, sometimes people will say something, but we're looking at the themes and the trends. Yeah. And then we're coming together in our mooqi meetings and we're deciding, is this something that's causing us pain on a frequent enough basis to take action? Yeah. And you know what? It might annoy us, as a management team, but if this is painful, if this is a challenge for a lot of people, we're going to have to do something about it, whether we like it or not. It's important to address it.
I mean, I think that's the thing. These issues that are on people's minds, they're there whether we ask the question or not, and they're affecting whether they choose to come to work, whether they choose to engage, whether they choose to stay in the company. So for me, but it's easy for me because I'm not running the business, right? For me, my mindset is, this is already dictating what happens every day. Let's get it out into the open. Let's do something about it. But for you, Niall, from your point of view, because obviously Olga has told us from her point of view, nope, this was something that we wanted to do. Were you nervous? Were you worried about this?
Not at all.
Or, no?
Absolutely not at all. And, the question would be, why would you be? And it goes back to that, and to be fair, we started in a pretty good place. And I think, and this is not at all about resting laurels, but there's a subconscious element to this whereby people do feel, if I've got an issue, I need to get it on the table. Now, what mooqi did is probably take that to a level of granularity that we certainly hadn't gone to before, and it was fairly intense for the 12 weeks. Yeah. And we had a high level of engagement. And what we were looking for, certainly what I was looking for, are themes. Yeah. You might get the odd individual, great idea, et cetera, et cetera. But by and large, for any business sort of stepping into this, the very obvious thing you're looking for are themes across staff. Yeah. It's not the person who would love a puppy in reception, for example. That maybe isn't going to land, although they're entitled to share that.
Unless everybody wants the puppy.
And to be frank, even if everybody did, we would have to take a bit of an executive decision on that. But what you're looking for are easy wins and sort of themes through this as well. Because to be frank, we are a commercial organisation. We do need to see this through the prism, absolutely, of culture, enhancing culture, but equally through the prism of the commerciality of anything we seek to put in place and the benefits of that. And that's where, say, Olga and the management team more widely would step in and review it and talk about it. And importantly, this is the important bit, feedback. Yeah. Not just where we are going to move, but where we're not going to move in certain themes and decisions and so on and so forth. And we give that feedback and people feel at least they've been listened to, and that's super, super important.
I think that's such an important part of it is a lot of the time in companies when the feedback comes in, if the organisation can't or doesn't want to do something about an issue, it just gets swept under the carpet. And one thing that absolutely breaks trust and frustrates people so much is when they know feedback has come through a survey, they know everyone's talking about something, and then the report comes out and it just leaves that section out entirely, rather than just bringing it out into the open and saying, look, we can't do something about that, here's why. Yeah. And I don't believe you always have to change as a result of feedback. I think sometimes what you've got to be prepared to do is just have an authentic conversation with people and say, look, here's why things are the way that they are. And sometimes present that to them as a challenge and say, we don't know a better way to do this that will work for the business, that also works for you. If you have ideas or suggestions that you think will work better for the business and work for you, bring them to the table? Because I think a big part of all this is the way in which we engage the employee population in wanting to shape the culture of the business that they want to be part of. It's not just about let's get loads of data and then we'll go away and fix your problems. It's actually about saying, let's come together, let's look at this together, and let's work together to make it better. So it's not just have a rant, have a moan, complain about things, have a dig at somebody, and expect someone to go and fix your problems. It's put all the feedback in place, and then let's come together and work together on this. But is there an education piece around the way in which people give that feedback? And I'm not just talking about with mooqi. I mean, have you ever found that the way that people express themselves and give feedback isn't maybe, they need to remember that there's a human being on the other side receiving the feedback. So have you ever had to do anything around that?
I genuinely can't think of many scenarios, if any, where somebody has been really inappropriate. As you rightly said, I think there is an expectation that we, absolutely, we want to hear your feedback, but be professional, be courteous with it too. Let's be respectful. And I genuinely can't think of any times where somebody has sort of stepped that line.
No, for me, it's an opportunity for learning, actually.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because, and there are many occasions, I'm going to say, we've embraced absolutely everything that came through from mooqi for all variety of reasons, whether it be commercial or practicality and so on and so forth. But we absolutely, and it's not just mooqi, but it is, day-to-day life in Kinecx Energy. We're trying to feed back in that respectful way, but through, it's not a blunt feedback, it's through a prism of understanding.
Yeah.
It's exactly to your point. Here's why this isn't maybe at this point in time appropriate. We will consider it maybe in a year's time, or we may not in a year's time, and here are the reasons why. And it's that sort of, and it's an education for learning. Again, I can't remember, there's many conversations I would have with people say, well, look, put yourself in my spot.
Yeah.
Put yourself in my seat.
Yeah.
And look at your question in the same light. What would you do?
That's a really good way to look at it, yeah.
I can tell you 9 times out of 10, the answer will reflect the answer that I'm providing. Right. So and that again engenders understanding.
Yeah.
And just lets people sort of better reflect, if you like, why they're getting what they might perceive as negative feedback. It's not negative feedback, it's just feedback that on that particular issue at that particular time.
Yeah. So in terms of the feedback, you've both mentioned a couple of times about your high levels of engagement with the process and with giving the feedback to begin with. I was at an event the other day and there was a lady on stage who was raving about the return rate that they got for their employee engagement survey, which was 90%, okay? Which is very, very good, but she made the point, almost no organizations on the planet get close to 90% in terms of response rate. Not only did you get that in terms of your engagement survey that we do at the start and the end, you were above 90% in the first one, and I think you were 89 point something in the second one. But you also, every single day, got 77% response rate to the mood gauge. Right, that's every day. What was behind that? What do you think made people engage and choose to take part?
I think the way we launched the accelerator was really, really important. We do have a good culture. We know that. But we thought, what's the best way of doing this? Do we bring everybody into a room, in the office? Do we email out this, details of this new thing? Or do we take it as an opportunity to get away and get off site? And we did that. We brought everybody away to Castlewell in Forest Park, beautiful part of the world, and spent the day in the castle, in the grounds of the castle, had a load of fun, great crack. And that's when we started to introduce, this is the accelerator, this is why we're doing it. We had actually sort of given small insights on the lead up to this event, so people knew in a high level what it was going to be, but it was bringing people together again because we'd significantly changed in terms of the size of the business as well. We're still sort of finding ourselves. It was lovely to be able to get away and just reconnect as well. And we just spent the day together having a bit of fun, having a bit of crack, and then we asked then for volunteers to be our culture catalysts who act as the change agents who drive the mooqi process. We were overwhelmed.
Yeah.
We had departments where there were like almost people fighting over it.
Yeah.
You know, and then we ended up, I think we ended up giving everybody that wanted to be a culture catalyst, you know, that role. And in several departments there were two.
Yeah.
We're co-catalysts.
Because there was so many people who volunteered.
So, you know, whatever we did on that day worked. It really rallied the troops, and everybody then, I think there was a real buy-in right from the start.
Very good.
I think the buy-in from the start, the 70 to 80% buy-in from the start, to be frank, probably reflects the generally good health of the culture even prior to mooqi. So, you know, without, you know, look at perhaps the potential negativity of this, but for any company that's starting from a lower base and wants to drive to, you know, better their culture, the expectation must be you're starting 20, 30, 40% engagement. But you must drive, the drive must be therefore to increase the levels of engagement. How do you increase the levels of engagement? You start listening. And I think from the very beginning, there has to be a commitment from the management team that, you know, of the process. Here's the process we're engaging in, but here's the role we will play as a management team in terms of looking at the mooqi feedback, whether it be through the catalyst, the mooqi meetings, and here's how how we will assess it. And it's like everything else, you're judged on how you will deliver it. So whilst there's an obligation on staff to engage, there's equally an obligation on the management team to deliver against that. So, you know, and that ought to be reflected in the second survey in terms of what's happened. I know 12 weeks is a relatively short period of time, but there ought to be indications and signals that actually the management team are bought into this. We are listening, and here are the things we're doing in response to what's coming back from mooqi, and that will drive engagement. I say, look, I think there's no two ways about it. I think the scores we had in terms of engagement reflected probably where our culture was to begin with, and we did push it. But I do think there's that absolute need for upfront commitment from the senior leadership team, management team, and then subsequently the feedback loop to show how that's being acted upon.
I think you're absolutely right. They need to believe that this is not just a data gathering exercise. If they think it's just going to be give feedback, it'll fall on deaf ears, but we'll have a load of data, or try and get a badge for the sake of having a badge, then they won't take part. But even in organizations where things are not good, what I'm finding is that the employees take part if they believe in the purpose for taking part to begin with. If they believe, it's back to your word, authentic. If they believe that this is something that's authentic, it's truly about helping them to have a better experience at work and helping to optimize the performance of the business, then they'll take part. And the company with the worst results that I've seen, what was really interesting for me was, without being asked to do so, the employees were writing their initials against their comments. So it's an anonymous platform, but they were putting their initials in.
It's a healthy sign.
Because they were going, do you know what? No, you're telling us you want to make this a better company to work in. We want to help make that happen. Which I think is really powerful. Now, I want to come back to a few more stats that I've got here, just in terms of the work that you've done on your culture over the last few years. And it's back to what I said before. We should always be doing these things strategically, going, how is it good for the employees? How does it help them to have a better experience at work? And by extension, a better quality of life. And at the same time, how's it good for the business too? And what you've seen is that your staff turnover in 2023 was 16.5% and is currently 4.6%. Your recruitment spend has dropped by 90%, presumably recruitment agencies and okay. Average length of service has increased by 7.2% to 7.5 years per person. I mean, the platform that gives you as a business to build from, knowing that you've got a reliable workforce that are going to be here, retaining that skill and expertise, incredible. Sickness absence has dropped by 77%, and sickness absence cost has dropped by 80%. I mean, those are earth-shattering statistics. If I was to say to you, Olga, from an HR perspective, what is behind that?
Oh, a range of different interventions, right from when I talked about when I joined the organisation, and we took a lot of time to really try and understand where our pain points were, and we devised the good to great intervention around 4 pillars. We looked at our organisational purpose. We spent significant time investing in our leadership capability through a 6-month really intensive leadership programme. We looked at career pathways. For example, we've introduced a scholarship programme into the business for the very first time for renewable engineering in partnership with Ulster University. That's one element of it. And then we spent a lot of time on our employer brand as well, because I suppose we were known commercially for as a household name, but maybe not necessarily as a place to come and work and have a career.
Yeah.
So we spent a lot of time, and we continue to spend a lot of time in this podcast, for example, of making people aware, this is a good place to come and work and have a really fulfilling career. And then, it's just everything that Niall's doing and the senior leadership team, the authenticity. For me, that's what it boils down to. The accelerator was another really, really important intervention. But the secret sauce is that genuine intent right from the start, because I think I'd mentioned earlier, you can have the most well-intended HR teams and culture catalysts, but if they do not get any buy-in from above, they're just wasting their time.
Yeah, absolutely. So what we now have the evidence to say is that if a job seeker comes to an interview with you, every company that a job seeker goes to an interview in, they're going to say, what's it like to work here? And the recruiter, the hiring manager is going to say, oh yeah, this is the best company I've ever worked in. But you're able to say, well, let me just pull out my statistics here. People working here have 18.2 times more positive than negative days at work.
Yeah.
Less than 4 bad days in every 100 working days. And that's working days, so that's like 5 months. I mean, that should be a no-brainer. That should be, right, sign me up, I'm in if you'll have me, type of thing. So congratulations, because most organisations don't have a culture like this. And I suppose that's probably the last question that I would like to ask you. I'd like to ask you loads more, but I'm aware of the duration of the episode. Most organisations don't have a culture like this, and you've probably experienced that. Why do you think that is?
It's the people. That's what it boils down to. It's just having the right people, and not necessarily tolerating toxic behaviour either. Because Niall has outlined many times, we're a commercial business. Toxicity and negativity breeds. It's very evident, especially when you are of a smaller scale. Sometimes in larger organisations, it's easier to sort of hide. And yes, we have hybrid working, and I suppose that's a great model to have, but the best times, the best memories that I personally have of working here are the times that we're together. For example, Crawfordsburn or away days. Time out in our breakout room around pizza, speaking to people, building relationships. We're human beings, we need physical interaction and connection, and that to me, that's really important.
And that's what mooqi shows, because time and again, what determines whether people have a positive or a negative day is the way that they interact with their coworkers. They get the opportunity to be around, to be part of a tribe, to be around people that they like, they have good relationships with, and that can give them positive days more often than not if they're around the right people, which is back to what you both said, recruitment. It's about what happens at the start, getting the right people, and then not tolerating, you've got that probation period. Not tolerating people who aren't going to fit in and behaviours that aren't going to fit in with your culture as well. You've got to be strong with that. And so often in so many organisations, there'll be people who misbehave, and it kills culture. And nobody faces up to them. Nobody challenges them. Nobody manages that bad behaviour. Have you ever experienced that, Niall? Have you ever had people that you've had to have difficult conversations with and sit down and say that behaviour doesn't work here?
Absolutely. And, I do joke about this sometimes. We're not, people aren't coming into work dancing across the car park, throwing rose petals at each other. It's not quite that sort of place, right? And it goes back to what you're saying. We are a commercial organisation, and I think what's lost sometimes is, and quite rightly, by the way, there's a huge focus on the numbers. We've been the go. In fact, this is our 20th year in operations, and we're a tremendously successful business. But to me, much of that success comes from having a successful culture, and a culture that works, that drives ultimately the success for the business. And I think sometimes those in leadership perhaps don't fully appreciate, maybe is the word, what I would see as the necessity to manage people as that important asset that will ultimately drive the success and the numbers in the business.
Yeah.
Personally, I don't think you can have one without the other. And yes, absolutely, that requires you to have difficult conversations. Thankfully, not too often in here, but absolutely, and they're a necessary part of what you need to do to drive the culture and drive the business.
Well, look, that's all we've got time for this episode. I do want to say thank you to both of you, both for coming on the show, but also, you know, for doing business in the way that you do, because I always say, I believe that it's a commitment to your people, it's a commitment to your business, it's a commitment to your customers, but actually it's a commitment to society to do business in a better way. I think we would have a better world if every organization cared about their people the way that you do. So congratulations, you are a Vibrant Workplace. Thank you for taking part. Thank you for the way that you do business and for coming on the show today. I've learned a lot. I've enjoyed the conversation. Hope it's been good for both of you as well.
Absolutely.
Great, thanks, Craig.
Yeah. Great.
And thank you to our viewers and listeners for tuning in. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. If you have, please give it a 5-star rating and a follow and a share on social media so that we can get these stories out to as wide an audience as possible, and together we can build a better working world. That's it for this time. If you are running an organization, you've got problems with talent attraction, engagement, or retention, and you think you would like to have a conversation, get some help with that, if you check out my website, vibranttalent.co.uk, there's an employer section on there, and you'll be able to see what's involved in the Vibrant Workplace Accelerator process. Thanks for tuning in. See you next time.